All right, we've got all these people arguing about who invented hip hop, but in my opinion, all of them are stupid. Because the fact of the matter is that DJs invented hip hop. My people invented hip hop. Not rappers, not black people, not Latino people. DJs. DJs invented hip hop. So like Tariq Nasheed saying that, oh, it was a black creation. Sure, black DJs created it. But did black basketball players create it? No. Did black baseball players or football players create hip hop? No. It was DJs, right? And a similar argument could be made when people say, well, white people created records. No, actually, people from New Jersey created records. So you can see how there's all these arbitrary categories that people will choose to when it's like fits their narrative, right? Because I can easily say, well, DJs from New Jersey invented hip hop because a person from New Jersey invented the record and DJs invented hip hop. And you can't argue that DJs did invent hip hop. Like, just like Tariq Nasheed says, Latino people were standing in the side and they were just coming to the parties. Well, MCs were just standing to the side while DJs were actually creating the rhythmic patterns using looped records that MCs did then come to rap over. But the fact of the matter is that DJs invented hip hop. And this is one thing that's being skipped over completely in the argument when people are trying to define what hip hop is as a genre, because people want to conveniently only go back to the point in which they entered hip hop. So, like, mainly there's four people whose arguments I'm going to be addressing in this video. You have Tariq Nasheed, who kind of sparked this whole thing off by creating the Microphone Check movie, which is basically a movie about who created hip hop, and he's trying to push the date back further than the whole kind of like Africa Bambaataa and Cool Herc thing and Grandmaster Flash, which, I mean, it makes sense because genres are always ill-defined. You know, when did this drum beat become defined as ska reggae? I mean, ska punk as opposed to like English style punk. You know, it's like, oh, there's a few like note variation differences that they use in like ska punk, which is like a West Coast California thing, as opposed to like, you know, like a Sex Pistols, which is like more distorted and more dissonant chords and stuff like that. But basically, the two musical genres are the same. So it's like genres are accepted by cultures. You can't just have like a music genre, because a music genre is basically just a form, like a geometric form. Because as like a musician, I don't see it as like you're creating music. It's like there's just numerical patterns, and there's certain numerical patterns where you place the different instrument beats and notes, and those create the forms which are considered musical genres. But then those musical genres also have to be accepted by like a group of people. And that's where you get like, you know, the difference between like ska punk and English punk, or like West Coast hip hop versus East Coast hip hop, which they're the same genre. Or you can even go like drum and bass versus hip hop. Like, what's the difference? The only difference is the beats per minute. The production methods of making a drum and bass song and making a hip hop song are exactly the same. So, kind of going off on a tangent there, but you can see how this argument in and of itself is completely arbitrary for the most part. And like, I see where Tariq Nasheed is coming from with this, where he's saying that, you know, it's something that can't be copyrighted, right? And a lot of people make money off of hip hop: white people, Jewish people, black people, Latino people make money off of it. And I don't see a problem with that, as long as they're, you know, doing it in a kind of traditional way. And that brings me back to the DJ thing, right? So you got Fat Joe, that I've watched what he has to say about it. You got Lord Jamar, and then you got NECRO, which is he's a part of Nonfiction. And so you've got kind of three diverging views, because Lord Jamar is black, Fat Joe is Latino, and NECRO is Jewish. I guess he says he's Jewish white. I mean, I don't know. That's what he says. So, you know, they have different views based on the time in which they entered into the hip hop game And also they have different views of like what should and shouldn't be hip hop. Now, one of the things that they all seem to agree on is that you have to be like hood or something like that, which doesn't really make any sense. Again, it's an arbitrary category because none of these people have been poor since the 90s when they became famous musicians. So if being quote unquote hood is one of the categories that defines someone as a hip hop artist, none of these people are hood anymore. They're all rich, basically. You know, they're rich, famous musicians. So that would, on its face, disqualify them from their own category that they're defining hip hop as. So being hood is not a category of hip hop, right? And if you're going to look at a traditional hip hop group from like the 80s or even like late 70s, all of them had DJs. And Lord Jamar, Fat Joe, nor NECRO have a DJ in their group or as like attached to them as like a part of their group, right? So none of them can claim that they're doing traditional hip hop. Like, do you see what I'm saying? Because like, okay, you've got like Grandmaster Flash, you got Cool Herc. They were DJs. African Bambaataa was a DJ. These are the people that were credited. I know Tariq Nasheed wants to push it back farther. I mean, we can go all the way back to like scat jazz if you really want to be like, oh, well, people were talking over rhythms in the 1920s. Okay, great. But that's not what it's defined as. You know, it was defined as the like DJs looping kind of like drum loop style beats and like breaks where it was an instrumental part of the record. So you can't really have hip hop without a DJ because DJs were the core of hip hop. Even when MCs were standing on the side trying to get on stage because the DJs were already on stage. So none of you guys created it. Not DJs created it. Rappers did not create hip hop. DJs created hip hop, and DJs are not even being mentioned in this conversation, right? In the original hip hop groups, right? You have like, you know, Fresh Prince and Jazzy Jeff. Public Enemy had Terminator X. LL Cool J had Cut Creator. You know, DJ Premier, right? All like these like kind of like groundbreaking groups or like the original groups, right? Run DMC had DMC Jam Master Jay, right? KRS-One, I forget what his DJ was named. So all these groups had DJs, and they were kind of like the rhythmic backbone of the group. And they all, most of them did scratching and cutting and different types of beat juggling techniques and stuff like that. And nobody has that anymore. Everybody's all like, oh, your production. It's like, your production is crap, right? What are you doing? Like, you're taking a loop of a record and then you're putting a drum loop over it. Like that's what most of you guys are doing. Like, you're just taking one loop from a record. You don't even program the drums or anything. You just take another drum loop and then you just play the drum loop over the melody loop, and that's it. And then you're like, oh, I'm a musical genius, right? No, you're not, right? It's a good genre, but unless you're like actually playing the notes and stuff like that, it's like, and that's why it became so rapper focused, because, you know, if you look at like African Bambaataa and Planet Rock, like he was actually playing the synths and stuff like that. And that's like one of the like best original hip hop songs ever. And people want to like act like African Bambaataa is like no longer part of hip hop because of what he got Me Too'd or whatever. So then we get to the argument of like, is hip hop racist, right? I think that we should just throw this word racism out, because it's such an ill-defined term. It's like, is it power versus privilege, or is it if you just don't like people, or is it, do you think your race is better than? Because a lot of these people, black or white or whatever race you are, fall into these categories where you think your race is better than the other race, or this, that, and third, right? And the fact of the matter is that most people are xenophobic, no matter what race you are. You prefer to be around people that look like you and talk like you, and you distrust people that don't look like you and don't talk like you. It doesn't matter if it's a race thing or if it's a class thing or any other type of category that you want to put people in, that where you decide that you don't like this category about the person because it's not the same category that you're in, right? And people will try to discredit other people based on their own personal preferences and biases. Like, we can go back to the hood thing, right? None of these guys have been poor since the 90s, but they all still act like they're so hood and they're going to beat you up and da 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 da. Like, I'm more hood than you. Like, I've been poor my entire adult life. Like, you haven't. You've been a rich, famous person your entire life. So it's like the whole hood thing it's a non sequitur. It's stupid. It doesn't make any sense. It's an arbitrary category, right? Like, you're trying to act like people from the suburbs have never been in a fight before, never seen a gun before. Like, it's stupid. It's so stupid. Like that. It's like, I really don't even want to be talking about it. It's that stupid. But it's like, this is what people are talking about. They're like talking about, oh, can a white guy rap? And why is Eminem the only famous white rapper? And why is Fat Joe? It was the same thing for women for a long time too. It was Foxy Brown, and then Foxy Brown got knocked out by Little Kim, and that was it. And then until like Nicki Minaj came along, and then they were like, oh, we can really market this like women stuff. And then it was like in the like 2000s, so they were trying to market hip hop towards women anyway, more. And that's when they got rid of all like boom bap stuff, and then like Drake style stuff was popular with the singing, right? Because they were trying to market it to women. So they were trying to do the R&B crossover, which was a huge no-no, basically from the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. It was like, like Wu-Tang Clan was known for saying, oh, R&B, rap and bullshit, right? They were like, you can't do singing because that's the opposite of hip-hop. And then Drake came along, and then, it was more appealing to women. And then they're like, wow, we can market this stuff to women if we put like auto-tune in there and all this other stuff, right? So to say who can rap, it's that's stupid. Anybody can rap, but it's the perception that people like these people have painted of hip hop as being this like male centered hood, poor people music, right? And so you've painted yourself into a corner where now you have to pretend like you're still hood and you're still this and you're still that, and you're not. You're not. Like Fat Joe, he's like talking about like wearing like diamonds and chinchilla freaking fur coats and driving these fancy cars. That's not hood. Like, hood means like you're poor and like you can barely make it and you're barely making it. Right? Like, it's not like a mindset where it's like, oh, I was in the hood when I was 12 years old and so I'm still hood. And like, no, that's not how it works. Like, you're not hood anymore. Like, maybe you talk like that. That's how you talk, because your parents were poor, right? Just like my parents were middle class. So I still talk like a middle class person, but I've been poor my entire adult life. So I'm more hood, quote unquote, than you. And I'm also a DJ, so my people are the people that created hip hop, right? And you could say, oh, well, white people created the records. And I could say people from New Jersey created the records, right? Because Thomas Edison was from New Jersey. So it's like, it's all a bunch of arbitrary BS that people are using to self-aggrandize themselves as if the thing that they have, that's their whatever quality, their innate quality, being born poor or being born black, right? Or being Latino or whatever, gives them some type of absolute authority to claim anything. There is no centralized authority of hip hop. There is no king of hip hop passing down the crown, right? So then people go to the numbers thing, right? which again, it's a good metric of seeing how much money you made, but it doesn't cut to the core issue. And this is another thing that I'm not hearing, right? What is a good hip hop song? What makes, instead of arguing about who's the most thugged out and who's been in the most fights in the hood and who sold the most drugs and who's the biggest thug or biggest this or biggest that, right? Because obviously Fat Joe's the biggest. But jokes aside, right? What actually consists of a good hip hop song? What makes a verse a good verse? I would like to hear more discussion of that instead of discussion of who's going to shoot the most people and who could slap somebody else and who's tough and who was poor when they were 12 years old. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, oh, when I was 12, I was poor, so that makes me qualified to rap. No, it doesn't. What is a good rap? Because, like, people say, oh, Eminem's so good. Eminem is okay. Like, I get what NECRO's saying. Like, Eminem is really not the best, quote-unquote, white rapper, right? R.A. the Rugged Man is the best white rapper. And if you look, you can see videos of R.A. where he's talking about how the record label wouldn't let him do a partnership record with Method Man because him and Method Man were actually friends in real life. And that's how you got the Red Man and Method Man like meet up or whatever. Because Red Man, Method Man, I mean, those were two good albums or whatever. But the fact is that, yeah, the record labels told R.A. the Rugged Man, you're not marketable. So it's the record labels and the fans, I would say also the fans that listen to it, they want to see a quote unquote thugged out black guy. That's what they want. That's what they've been trained to accept, and that's what they've been trained to listen to. And since people that were kind of like poor from the hood wanted to use that to validate their abilities, right, or validate their authority, more to say, to rap, is that, oh, you have to be poor, right? You have to be black, or you have to be from this neighborhood or that neighborhood. And now it's coming back to bite you in the ass because now you're like a rich white guy because you've been famous since the 90s, and people are saying, well, you're not really like a poor black guy, and we're expecting poor black guys, right? So when you try to make yourself an authority, right, and then you try to justify it with these arbitrary categories that you yourself don't even fit into, and then you want to get mad when people say you're not allowed to do it, right? And that's really, I think, the crux of it. I mean, I could go on and on and on about it, but I think I hit the most important points, right? That DJs invented hip hop, not rappers. Rappers came after DJs, right? And then maybe Latino people came a day after that, and then white people came a day after that, right? Doesn't matter. DJs invented it. So until I hear somebody saying DJs invented hip hop, you're all dumb, right? You're all of you. I don't care what you say. I am correct on this because I know for a fact that there wouldn't be this type of hip hop music if it wasn't for DJs looping the breaks of the records. And that's why they're still to this day called break beats. That's why they're still called break beats. They're not called rap beats. They're called break beats. A rap style beat is called a break beat, right? Okay. So then you have the fact that, yes, black people couldn't copyright rap music. So therefore anybody and their grandma could profit off of it, right? And then you also have the fact that people are xenophobic, and they wanted to exclude people that don't look exactly or talk exactly like them. But everybody does that. So yes, once you define the music as a music that's made by poor black people, it kind of pigeonholes you into this box where people aren't going to accept it if you're a white guy, right? They're not going to accept it as much, more so if you're Latino, because Latino people are also seen as poor. But stereotypically, white people, and specifically white Jewish people, aren't seen as being poor. Like, I'm not saying there aren't, I mean, I know a lot of poor Jewish people. So it's a stereotype. And that's part of music is image and marketing, because it's not just about your skills, right? And then the last point is, can we actually have an adult discussion about what makes a good song? Not just, oh, I have 20 million views on Spotify and this guy only has 10 million views on Spotify. Because as far as I understand, the way that Spotify works, I've never used Spotify, is that your music could be put on a playlist, and that playlist could have been liked 5,000 times, 10,000 times, and it's not like specifically somebody's going and buying your album. They might just be listening to a white boy hip hop playlist, right? They might just be listening to, or even if they are listening to your music, they might not have went out to buy your newest album. They might be listening to some of your songs from the 90s. Like, you can see that with Fat Joe, because you can see on his YouTube channel that his new album that just came out doesn't really have the same numbers as his stuff that he did with Big Pun in the 90s. And for me personally, that's how I listen to it. You know, like if I listen to a Wu-Tang Clan album, I'm listening to, 90s, like Only Built for Cuban Links or Iron Man, Ghostface, right? I'm not listening to their new album. The new album was horrible. And we're not even going to get into the whole like Martin Shkreli and what they did with that album. But it came out that RZA didn't produce that album anyway. So you can see that we just need to have an adult discussion about what makes a rap song good, right? Like what makes a verse a good verse versus a bad verse? Like, is it delivery, content? What's the delivery like? What's the content like? Speed is kind of in there, but it's basically like delivery, content, beat selection, and you can add in like your marketing image and stuff like that. But again, then you're going into arbitrary categories when you're saying, oh, well, you got to look like this, or and then you're complaining when someone's saying, oh, well, you don't look like this and talk like this, right? Or you're not from here, or you're not this race. But then you'll turn around and say the exact same thing. Oh, you got to be hood, and you got to be this, and you got to be that. It's been so long now. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it would be like if there was like an all Asian orchestra and they were playing Mozart. And then you're like, oh, well, they're not all white. I'm not going to listen to this. Right? Like, it's stupid. It's really dumb. I mean, honestly, this whole conversation is dumb. It's like there's so much going on in the world, and these people have these huge platforms, and they're talking about, oh, this guy said Latinos can't rap and be in hip hop, and okay, who cares? We're in like 3 wars right now, and like the country's about to like fall apart from like inflation, and you want to talk about who's allowed to rap? Like, are you kidding me? Like, seriously? Like, so that's basically it, Who invented hip hop? DJs. Who's allowed to rap? Whoever the F wants to. Does it suck that black people can't copyright hip hop? Yes. And let's have a discussion about what makes a hip hop song a good hip hop song, right? What's the tradition of it? Because to me, if you don't have a DJ in your group, you're not real hip hop, right? Because all original hip hop groups had DJs. So if you can't show me your DJ, then you're not a real rapper, right? Okay, that's it. End the video. Have a good day.